Good morning, everyone, or afternoon, depending upon where you are joining us from. Thank you so much for being here. I'm really excited to introduce our panel. We are, as Vince and I just discussed, going to be talking about the food system and the role of business in transforming the development as it pertains to the food system. So we are going to be chatting a little bit about how businesses can play a role in this. We're joined by leaders of sustainable food production and consumption, and we'll be exploring how business can scale and develop a more viable food system from the farmer's field to the consumer's plate and at every stage in between. So I'm very excited to introduce our distinguished panelists. We have with us today Dr. David Nabarro, who wears many hats, among them Special Envoy to the World Health Organization, Director General for COVID-19, and co-director of Imperial College Institute of Global Health Innovation. He's also overseeing the 2021 Food Systems Summit dialogue process. We also have with us Alejandra Schrader. She's the chef and founding member of the Chef's Manifesto. Welcome, Alejandra. And we also have with us Eric Soubeiran, who's the Chief Sustainability Officer and Chief Executive Officer of the Danone Ecosystem Fund. And unfortunately, Sherry de Atiblano, the founding farmer and CEO of Agria Agricultural System International, is not able to make it to be with us today. She had a last-minute family emergency, so we're sorry that she can't be joining us. I would like to note we would welcome and encourage audience participation in our session. You'll see the chat box on the right side of your screen, so please put in your questions for this session, and we will get to as many of them as we can during our 30 minutes together. So we're going to dive right in. Our time is short. David, I would love to you give us a quick overview of that process, what it means, and how you envision all actors in the food system working together towards those goals.
Thanks, Teresa. Because of some glitch, I missed what process you were referring to. I think I know what it was, but I just want 1 second. Could you tell me again that, just remind me, please?
Yes, sure thing. The Food System Summit.
Yes, good. Well, first of all, it's wonderful to be invited to come into Devex world and to see you again, Teresa, because we've had several encounters in recent years on food systems and on nutrition. This is the first time the United Nations has had a food systems summit. And it's a special summit. It's one that is being organized by Mr. Antonio Guterres, the Secretary General. And he's doing it because he's convinced that there needs to be more concerted focus on food systems in order to help the world to achieve the sustainable. The Secretary General believes that unless food systems are subject to careful analysis and some considerable shifting, they will not contribute to the SDGs. And if food systems are not in a good place, then it's going to be hard for the SDGs to be realized. So that's where we're aiming at. The summit is being prepared now. It's due to take place in New York in September 2021, with a pre-summit in Rome at the end of July 2021.
Thank you so much for that update, David. Tell us a little bit about how you aim to bring together all actors of the food system in this process, and in particular, how you are engaging businesses.
Well, thanks, Teresa. For some time now, my colleagues and I have been thinking, how can you help to shift a system where there are multiple actors involved? The actors have very different perspectives on what needs to be done, and there is no obvious mechanism to nudge everybody into a better place when it comes to sustainability. You can't simply get a result by addressing everybody and sort of telling them they've got to do things differently. Even if you're a top professor and you've got a hugely good reputation, the fact is, not everybody is going to respond to the same science-based messages as everybody else will. I mean, we've seen it in so many issues, including with COVID. So instead, what we have to do is to create an environment. All the different actors in the system feel that they are respected and able to participate, and then offer them a moment in which they can have and debate about the best possible directions to move in. That's why in my team, we are organizing dialogues about the future of food systems in order to help governments, civil society organizations, businesses, food producers, food processors, universities, schools, and frankly, everybody else with an interest to be thinking about what kind of food systems they would like to emerge between now and the end of 2030, which is the end of the Sustainable Development Period. We can't do this without businesses. After all, the majority of us obtain our food from farmers who are business people, often taking extraordinary risks and being very effective. We also get our food from fishers, and we usually have to buy that as well. We get our food from those who live in the forest.
Thanks so much, David. Alejandra, I want to bring you in on this and learn a little bit more about what you see your role as a chef in the Food Systems Summit process, as well as advocating for plant-based diets.
Yes, thank you so much for having me be part of this conversation. As a chef, I'm part of an intricate part of the food system because on one end, I'm a business owner, part of the unfortunately very affected food service industry, and so a very first-hand witness of what a failed and broken food system has caused. On the other, I see myself and all chefs as advocates and as having the platform to bridge the gap between the consumer side and the production side. And I think that this is the time that Dr. Nabarro pointed out how important food is to mitigate the current pandemic, the climate crisis, the huge inequities that we are witnessing when it comes to access to nutritious food. And certainly, I believe that gearing more towards plant-based diets could be a huge way to mitigate this crisis, because on one end, it would give access to nutritious food to more people, and on the other, it would promote biodiversity, which is so important to deal with the climate crisis.
Thank you so much, Alejandra. Eric, I want to bring you in on this conversation. Tell us more about how Danone views its responsibility to transform agriculture.
Well, thank you very much for the invitation, and very nice to be with you this morning or this afternoon. I think it's very clear to us that the food system is broken. And that itself is, as a food company, we have a big responsibility in addressing this topic. And I think we build up a system that has linearized very much the agriculture system collectively, with some success, that's a fact, but we see very much the limit of this system that has transformed agriculture from, I would say, starting its journey from biology to chemistry, but also by creating a system that, by this linearization and this over-specialization, is creating massive systemic issues when it comes to soil health, biodiversity loss. And I think it's up to us as an industry, as a sector, to decide if we want to transition this system from a problem to a solution space. And I think that's really the responsibility of actors like Danone, and we are engaging into the transformation of our agriculture system to what we call a regenerative agriculture. That's a journey that we have started a couple of years ago, and that we are now accelerating. The good thing with regenerative agriculture is that it starts with, for our strategy, on three very simple pillars. The first one is to put soil health at the center of the dynamic. The soil health at the center means that we need to work collectively with our farmers on changing their crop rotation, changing their tillage practices, reducing chemical entrance, so that basically we restore soil health. And it's big business. It's big business and good business, because by doing that, you're restoring the capacity of soil to regenerate and therefore to be more fertile. So you double down on this, and you're increasing the resiliency of your model. So that's the first pillar, making sure that soil ready is becoming central in our capacity to develop a resilient business model. Second, very important pillar for us is animal husbandry. We do believe in Danone that you need a mix and a balanced diet if you want to reform the system. You need to basically balance animal protein and vegetal protein. This is why, alongside to our traditional dairy brands like Activia or Actimel, we have also plant-based, and we are the leaders in plant-based drinks with brands like Silk, like Alpro, like Provamel. We could have made the choice to separate the two. We have integrated the approach because we very much believe that flexitarism is of the essence in what we're doing. And that we, by leading that, we can lead also the transformation of our food system. And so second part is really creating basically a system of flexitarism where you reform, basically you redesign the role of animal husbandry in a circular agriculture system. When ruminants graze and they use land for grazing, this can be compatible with planetary diet. The problem is when you linearize again the system, and when you give food to animals that are imported or that are relating to deforestation. So we need to transform that heavily. And the third pillar, concretely on which we are engaged, is to develop a new generation of farmers and farming principles. And for that, we are very much engaged into a transformation, which is to move the system of remuneration of farming. Farmers, and I think Dr. Nabarro alluded to that, have a very important social role. And the society needs to recognize that. And they need to remunerate the ecosystem services. That's why it's very important next year with the UN Food Summit, with the COP26, with the Biodiversity COP, that collectively we change the paradigm of how we can remunerate farming from only a volume-based remuneration to an ecosystem services remuneration base. And that's a transition that we, as a food company, to your point, we're ready to take up. This is why we are ready to play our part in this transition, guaranteeing offtake, co-financing the transition, but we need also multilateralism to work at its best by reallocating the $1 trillion of subsidies towards the transition of this agriculture system. And that's really where we are. So 3 pillars: soil health, the rebalancing of diet, and making sure that we really build up this new farming generation with ecosystem services as a remuneration.
Thank you so much, Eric. I really loved what you said about transitioning from a problem to a solution and having that solutioned mindset when we're thinking about all of these things. You definitely emphasize the role of multilateralism in all of this. What can Danone be doing to encourage other businesses to be thinking in this way as well, and sort of encourage more development and more thinking from other big agri companies?
I think, first of all, we have to be humble because we have so much to do. So the thing that we can do is to basically move all this discussion in a pre-competitive manner. It is very important to work collaboratively with chefs, with thought leaders like Dr. Nabarro to make sure that collectively we work on solutions. This is one thing. I think this is very important also to scale up our pilot. I have the chance to lead also the Danone Ecosystem Fund, which is a fund that is dedicated to transform our value chain into an inclusive value chain. And I think piloting things locally, close to consumers, creating the link between food and consumer trust, this is how we can create this engine. And that's very important. But I think it's very important that corporates open, that corporates learn and accept to work collaboratively. And I think this is where we need to create alliances, coalitions of actions to make that happen.
Thanks so much, Eric. And David, in addition to your role in the Food Systems Summit process, you obviously have been intimately involved with the COVID response as well. Tell us a little bit about the connection between the two and what the COVID pandemic has taught us about our broken food system.
I just needed a moment to undo my mute.
No worries.
I understand why Eric was saying the food system is broken. I tend not to be quite so extreme. I think food systems in some places are still remarkable in enabling, 7.8 billion people to have pretty good access to food. Of course, we do have quite high levels of hunger at the moment, but compared with how it might have been, I do feel that there has been some incredible innovation in food. But just going one step further, one of the themes of our discussion today has been that people have solutions, people are the solution, and that applies whether we're talking about the COVID-19 pandemic or whether we're talking about the future of food. Food systems are not just about commodities, even though we sometimes like to think they are. They're about the relationship between people and food production, food processing, food consumption, and food use. And the more we recognize that, and the more we can appreciate that inside a food system, there are hundreds of millions, perhaps even billions of people who have roles and who contribute, the better off we will be, because we will start to recognize that when we're thinking about changing food systems, we're thinking also about helping people to change so that things become better. I agree with Eric that it needs humility and co-creation. But I also want to stress that I think that all of us are making the point that businesses are inside this transformation. They engage with so many people as consumers. Look at the number of people Danone connects with each day. And businesses are seen as role models, partly because of the way in which their executives and their personnel behave. They're partly also because of the way in which their brands and customers interact. And I have an image that over time, businesses will shift away from presenting themselves as just focused on profit and value, cash value to the shareholder, and instead that they will be judged more and more on what they provide for societies, particularly in relation to some of the challenging problems that we are experiencing and that are going to be influencing the well-being of generations still to come. It's that new role for business that, in a way, it's been around for centuries. It's just we've forgotten about it, that businesses are not just about making profit. They're about engaging people to make life better. And I actually think that the Food Systems Summit offers an incredible opportunity to work with civil society, businesses, food producers, food processors, and of course, activists who've got very strong points of view. All need to be there and active because we all have roles in really the new environment of sustainable food systems.
David, I really love that point about thinking about the role that business ought to have in society and how we can mentally shift the way that we think about what business ought to be doing. Unfortunately, we've only got a couple of minutes left in this conversation. We could go on forever, I feel like. But Alejandra, I want to come back to you and hear from you in the few minutes we have about the changing role of people seeing chefs in society as well, and how we now think a lot more about where our food is coming from as well as who is preparing it. So tell us a little bit more how the Chef's Manifesto thinks about that in its role in the food system.
Right. So the Chef Manifesto has provided a great platform to educate chefs on our role and has created thematic areas that allows us to really try to promote the Sustainable Development Goals and to ultimately create a better food system. So I love what you said, which is true, because with more educated consumers, more and more people are becoming aware of the relationship between food and the environment and livelihoods and to things like even soil health, like Eric was talking about. And so as that demand increases, we as chefs have been in a good way pushed towards more sustainable businesses. People want us to talk about how we are upcycling food, how are we connecting with local farmers, and how are we holding them accountable for the sustainable practices that they are implementing. People in our restaurants and sources from our businesses want to know where our food is coming from. And I think that's a great motivation. In the Chef's Manifesto, something that started with about 16 chefs about 3 years ago. Now we're almost 600 chefs all over the world. We are all coming together to utilize the resources that we have, and also the ability to educate our customers as to what are the kinds of foods that they should demand and request for businesses. So again, we are in a great position to bridge the gap between the consumer side and the production side, and ultimately.
Unfortunately, I've got to interrupt you because our time is running out, but many thanks to all of our panelists. Thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today at Devex World, and we look forward to continuing the conversation. Thank you.